Okay. So I think Jane will join us. We have noticed her. She's very, very busy. She said she will be here. So I think we can start our session today now. Okay. Okay. So I can see that the live stream is working very well. Okay. Um, Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear audience, no matter where you are in the world. Um, this is the beginning of our long-expected Web3 Disruptors Week. First of all, let me take some time to briefly introduce what is the Disruptor Summit. The Web3 Disruptors Week this year is part of our regular Disruptor Summit events. This is a global online event, which is live streamed on YouTube, Vays for China market, as well as Meta Bloom Metaverse. Um, Disruptive Summit is a global influence conference brand launched by Star Consulting, and Starlabs Incubator. It aims to provide a high-quality display, sharing, and communication platform for countless disruptors in a magnificent era. Paying tribute to the spirit of disruptors and promoting exchanges and cooperation between the East and the West in the blockchain world. As we all know, that Web3 is the next revolution of the internet right now across the world. There are lots of discussions surrounding Web3. And also, we know that Web3 seems to have very huge promises to the world. We have to say that while the potential benefits of Web3 might not be immediately apparent, the revolution is happening. And we are already in the early stages of some forms of technology. So, against this background, we are hosting the Web3 Disruptors Week. Speakers and pioneers from all over the world are going to share their understanding and perspectives on very key topics in Web3 era, such as why Web3 matters, the Web3 mindset, gaming evolution Web3 era, Web3 infrastructure, femtech and women in Web3, metaverse and related infrastructure, so on and so forth. So this is a brief introduction of our discussion week this time. Now we are going into our very first session. Before we go, let me take a very brief time to introduce myself. I'm Jenny Yang, founder of Star Consulting and founder of Starlabs Incubator. I have been in the blockchain world for the past 5 years. So literally, I have seen how this huge blockchain technology and the digital assets are going from a very small corner to the mainstream. So I have witnessed the whole process. I feel very deeply that how that is why I feel that I feel very strongly about the topic of today. That is the roundtable path to building a responsible Web3 economy. So now, please, I will introduce our distinguished speakers today. The first one is Miss Tamara Ferreira Skimit. I'm sorry, I don't read German. I hope you forgive me.
No problem.
Tamara is executive director of Digital Euro Association, and she is specialist in financial markets with strong analytical and quantitative skills. She has had more than 15 years of experience working with investments and structuring of products, both in traditional markets as well as the disruptive markets, for example, the cryptocurrencies, the crowdfunding, etc. Welcome, Tamara. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker today is Mr. David Lee Kwa Chung, Professor Lee from Singapore University of Social Sciences. Professor has a huge mission to harness technology for Asian connectivity, financial inclusion via Singapore as a smart nation. Special interest in scalable technology for the masses, with emphasis on inclusive digital education, decentralized ledgers, China tech, Gov tech, big data, machine learning, and Silicon Valley culture. Welcome, David. Welcome from Singapore.
Hi, Jenny. Really nice.
Okay. Nice to meet you tonight. Okay, the next speaker is Miss Jen Thomason. Well, welcome, Jen. Welcome from Dubai.
I'm glad I made it. I was lost in the metaverse somewhere.
That's right. I guess you must get lost in the metaverse. Miss Jen Thomason is chair of Cassie Holdings London. She is also the co-founder of British Blockchain and Frontier Technologies Association. Dr. Thomason is a successful entrepreneur and is a thought leader in technological innovation, fintech, and blockchain for social impact. Dr. Thomason has been recognized in Forbes magazine as a leader in blockchain for social impact. And she's also an author for many books on blockchain technologies for global social change. At the same time, Dr. Thomason has consulted many multiple international organizations on digital transformation, sustainability, and ESG, including to the Commonwealth Secretariat on the preparation of fintech toolkit for central banks, and prepared and presented a technical paper on blockchain and sovereign bonds for Commonwealth Ministers of Finance meeting in 2019. Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Sean Cornan, and he is CEO at GreenGage, which is based in London. Mr. Sean is the founder. Mr. Sean has very extensive experience in the financial services. He has worked in various executive management positions. He founded GreenGage after working at the first bank in the world to offer crypto products to clients, Falcon Private Bank, where he served as the COO and the interim CEO of the London operation until leaving to establish GreenGage. Welcome, Sean, from London.
Thanks, Jenny. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Great to have you all from different countries to join us in the Web3 Disruptors Week. Okay, let's get it, because I think the audience can't wait to hear your insights. I won't waste so much time. My first question regarding today, our topic is path to building a responsible Web3 economy nowadays across the world, no matter whether it is in mainstream world or the blockchain community or in the investment community. So, for example, many people are just discussing, while seems like Web3 is an unstoppable future, but it is we still need many qualities to complete Web3. So that is why we focus on the responsible side of Web3. First of all, Web3 is a hot topic around the world at the moment. I want to know your view on Web3, and do you think it's a future? So perhaps we can start from Ms. Tamara.
Sure, thank you, Jenny. Yeah, the web is evolving at a rapid pace, and while the first two generations of web technology were designed to help us to find information, Web3 is aimed at making the internet more useful to everyone. Web 1 content mainly was read only, right? Static web pages that weren't interactive. So in other words, you would visit a website to get information, but you wouldn't give it any data back. So users were consumers. They could see the same content and only could read it like a newspaper. And with the Web 2, information began flowing in both directions. This was and still is the age of the social media. platforms and user-generated content. So data is created by users, but it doesn't belong to them, and it is stored and managed by big techs. So users were and still are products in the Web2. And at its core, the idea of Web3 is a web that is not controlled by a small number of central authorities, and theoretically puts user data and web content into users' hands. And it also allows for a web where users can profit directly from their data and all that money moving around the web every day. So users now are the owners of the information. And this is a quite rupture in the current Web2 model, because we are talking about a democratized, web-based, on an open source application. And it's hard to say if you achieve all these promises, but I believe we are walking in the direction of this transition.
Okay, thank you, Tamara. Sean, may I ask what's your view on the Web3, and do you think Web3 would be the future?
I think Tamara, I give a very good thought on this, kind of what Web3 is, where we are on the path to achieving democratization, if you will, of the internet in real form. And I think what's interesting to us at GreenGage is particularly the financial side, how we can open up access to finance in a way that's it's something it's still unfolding as we see. It's very early days, and I think there are different sectors that are probably a bit more advanced, like gaming, so to speak, or other kinds of transfer. But the things that most interest me are always about the consumer. How can we find what a consumer is looking for? And I think there are bits that we see with the likes of embedded finance and with the revolution in fintech, that there are paths to getting finance for a consumer which are much more intuitive, but they still ultimately rely on a centralized counterparty that may be hidden in the fintech layer. I went to a talk at Amazon. They had an executive forum last week, and one of the headline talks was that fintech is dead, Web3 is now here, like embedded finance, which I think is quite punchy. But I do think there are bits, particularly because we are people at the end of the day, I'm thinking of the consumer again, the likes of, say, advice or personal relationships, that the technology can move around. And I think Tamara was spot on saying that we can now own our data. In the UK, the likes of open banking have allowed people to port their data, and it's increasing as you look at the likes of digital passports. The idea of owning your data and offering that data then to select providers as you see fit, as opposed to Web 2.0, where the data is held by the likes of social media platforms, etc.
Thank you, Sean. I think you have proposed a very interesting question. Maybe we can discuss later. Fintech is good. Web3 is here. This is very interesting. Maybe we can discuss that a little later. Okay. Next one, Professor David. What's your view on the question?
Yes. Well, I think I don't really know what Web3 eventually will be like. I can just think of Web3 as something that we all hope for and desire in the virtual space. And I come from the era of punch card. I remember 1990, we have the Windows in the beginning of 1990, and there was a switch. And then in the year 2000, we have the .com, which is like the web one. And then in the year 2010, we see the mobile communication taking off. And now, and when that happens, we were seeing the exchange of information, right? From Web 1 to Web 2, we see a lot of exchange of information. Then we have the mobile network that can contribute. And now we are moving towards so-called the Web 3 that we hope for, which hopefully we have distributed communication, because communication itself is still very centralized. We have no control over that. Whatever we do on the web is still very much centralized if the communication is not distributed. That's what we hope and desire. We hope that Web3 is about individual ownership, is about clear, defined property rights that without intermediaries, that you have the private keys, and if there are any intermediaries, the cost is low, so that you still have certain control over the assets, because the trusted third party cost is a bit too high at this moment, excluding a lot of people from there. And finally, I think it's very important, because the whole movement, to me, of great value, and we would like to see in Web3, is privacy protection. And I think privacy protection is the ultimate goal of Web3. We own our own data, and we have our own exchange of value, and surely we want to have the concurrency in a distributed system, a true concurrency in the sense that every node is independent, making their own decision without influence from anyone else. So that's my hope and desire for Web3, which I don't really know what it is.
Okay. Professor David has been very frank. He doesn't know what Web3 would look like. I think this is a question of many people around the world now. For example, I've talked with some of my colleagues from previous companies. They are working in finance field or technology companies. They all ask the same question: what is Web3? What will the Web3 look like? So maybe that needs us all to answer this question together. Yeah. So Jane, good to see you. So can you share with us your idea on Web3?
Look, I can, but there's been so many most excellent descriptions. There's nothing much left for me to say. But let me take sort of one more step forward, because Web3 and that whole kind of toolbox of Web3 with all of the blockchain affordances, decentralized finance, NFTs, self-sovereign identity, decentralized governance, and so forth, is going to allow potentially the birth of the kind of vision that we've heard from Tamara and Sean and Professor Lee. It is a kind of a concept and a vision, and it's a bit like a Steve Jobs moment where he's imagining a computer in the palm of your hand, but no one had ever really thought about that before. And I think we're a little bit there, but I want to take you the one step further, which is to the metaverse, because to some extent, I think that this is giving a real boost to the development of Web3 and what people are doing, because it's got so much attention since Mark Zuckerberg announced that they were going to become Meta, and you've got the whole Web3 community trying to build metaverses, and then you've got Meta and Apple and Google and Microsoft. I think we're seeing a real increase in investment and an acceleration of some of those pieces of the Web3 toolkit. So I actually think 2 points to make. One is, I think that just the excitement about the metaverse will accelerate the pace with which people develop these Web3 environments. And then I also think, and it was mentioned before, and I've always, because I'm a kind of blockchain person at heart, or at least originally, that gaming is the most likely path to mass adoption. And now people have figured out how to put tokens in games that people can exchange and then take out again. I think that this is only going to grow and expand through gaming first.
Okay, thank you. So Jane said, can I say that you see lots of potential in metaverse and gaming in the current stage of Web3?
Well, I think that it will make people more interested in Web3 than possibly they were before, because there's just billions of dollars worth of investment going into this now, and it will require Web3 to be working for this to work.
Yeah, that's right. I'll continue our question just now. Many people don't know what Web3 would look like in the future. So do you think, can we say that Web3 is already here? Or always say, what stage are we in? In a very super early stage? So for example, compared with Web 2 era, our current stage where we are in Web3, what would which year would it be if we compare with Web2? So let's start again with Tamara.
Sure, Jenny. Yeah, so the future of Web3, it's all about decentralized applications. And of course, the development of blockchain technology is at the heart of Web3 network architecture. And we already have seen some applications that make part of the Web3, like cryptocurrencies, NFTs, decentralized apps, eddy computing, tokenization, metaverse, and so on. But it took around 10 years of transition from Web 1 to Web 2. And I believe we are still at the beginning of the transition to Web 3. And there is a longer way to go. And I think maybe the first reason is because blockchain has challenged too many powerful organizations, so global corporations, banks, the government, and as it is aimed to take over the power from them and make it decentralized. And maybe the second reason is a new generation is growing up, and they are spending a huge portion of their life in games, as Jenny mentioned, and in metaverse. And when they start to replace us, they will have different requirements for the market, and it will force business to adapt. And I think we will face this new era of internet.
Okay. Yeah, undoubtedly, Web3 should be a huge opportunity for new generation, the Generation Z, for example. Yeah, thank you, Tamara. So, Sean, may I ask what's your view on this question?
Jane, I think gaming is probably the first port of call for real events in this. I think it's in the trader space. I've been fascinated just reading science fiction, the likes of Snowcrunch, but it's even said that even with the Spielberg film Ready Player One, there's some insights you can gain into how the world might kind of take shape. But I think Facebook is a very, very interesting actor in this. I've seen crypto space particularly. Facebook decided to launch the Libra project, which became DM and now is no more. And a lot of central banks responded by looking more actively at CBDCs. And I think they're playing a similar role almost as a catalyst in the evolution of the metaverse. And this is more probably from a Western perspective. In just renaming themselves Meta, people have kind of clocked and said, what's going on here? Is this just the gaming space? Is this Fortnite in the science fiction world? Or is this something a bit bigger? I would agree with Tamara. I think we're early days. There is still a regulatory play, the government kind of getting tenor on what this is going to be. And I think as we've seen with the crypto world evolving really in the last decade, it takes time for parameters to kind of come into play for legislators, lawmakers, and the regulatory bodies to comfortable with what these new technologies represent. And I think ultimately it will come down to probably digital identity and governance. These benchmarks need to be set. The discussions like this are very important just for raising awareness at this stage. But I think we're all very, very both excited and concerned about promises and challenges that community thinking through represents.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So still, you mentioned gaming. Yeah, perhaps the most popular field. Maybe it will start this magnificent Web3 era. Yeah, and Professor David, may I ask what's your view on this question?
Yeah, I think I see two stages. I see the Web 2.0 metaverse. Let me call it centroverse. The centroverse will take off first because it's a convergence of technology that need a lot of coordination. So the centroverse will take off first, which is Web 2.0. metaverse, and you can see a lot of big countries, and it's driven by job creation. Government are finding ways to create jobs in a very difficult environment, and they will inject a lot of investment into the digital infrastructure to create a centriverse. And then that's the first stage. And we see there'll be a lot of coordination. There's a lot of building of the digital infrastructure to create jobs. And people will start to go into the centriverse with their goggles, with their new computer interfaces, whether it's through the brainwave or their eyes movement or whatever. Then I think everybody will realize that privacy is so important. And there will be a huge cry out for privacy protection. And that's where I think the Web3 metaverse will start to have mass adoption, because even the government will be afraid that their own centriverse will be taken over by hackers or by some malicious element. So I don't know when that will be. I think that will be soon, but I see two stages of development where some events has to happen before the adoption of Web 3.0 metaverse globally.
Okay, thank you, David. And just now, may I ask you again? Just now, you mentioned that Web3 will very likely have very mass adoption. So, which field would you think that it will start? Metaverse or gaming?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
Oh, I think in terms of the Web 2 metaverse, it will be from the job creation perspective, will be the digital twins, manufacturing. A lot of government will work into metaverse government, and then they try to have the digital twin and bring the manufacturing into the virtual world, because that is where you have the mass employment, and you don't have to have too much of the investment in education. You don't have to have too much of the investment in the digital literacy. So I see the digital twin as the first area of mass adoption. And then you will start to see that parallel in the virtual world, that a lot of gaming that will come into it, entertainment, sports. Those are the areas that I see happening concurrently with the digital twin.
Thank you, David. And Jen, so what's your view on this question?
So I got a couple of thoughts to add to it, because Professor Lee, I understand what you're saying, but I think that, global mass adoption, who knows about that? But what we're seeing already, for example, if you talk about self-sovereign identity, and one of the areas I'm really interested in is healthcare, and I actually think metaverse and healthcare is going to be a fast mover as well. And we've already got, Apollo Hospitals Group in India teaming up with iChili, which is a kind of metaverse gaming group, to develop products, and same in Korea. And in fact, it's absolutely digital health. Asia is going to lead, and I'm quite prepared to be on the record to say that. And you're seeing a lot of these different projects, but you're also seeing, and it's going to actually be launched in Britain already, an African startup that's done a self-sovereign identity health record, which in health we've been dreaming about for a long time, but they've actually done it, and it's been implemented in a hospitals group in Africa. So I think what we're going to see is some of these innovations coming from traditionally unusual quarters. But I would like to put forward that you mentioned government, and there are several governments like Korea and Dubai and Saudi NEOM that are already building metaverses for citizen services. And I think that healthcare is another one where you're seeing a lot of innovation already, like the play to earn games. People are making earn to exercise games. And I think you're just going to see that expanding in concert with the development of Web3. So Yeah, I'm backing healthcare and government as well, but all with some gamification and some exchange of value.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jane, for sharing this or your idea on this question. I think the audience must or would like to know more about your insights on how metaverse can empower healthcare. And I actually Jane has an article on Cointelegraph recently on metaverse and healthcare. So maybe whoever who are interested about this topic can go and search for the name of Jane and to study this article. So let's move on to our next question. That is, Web3 is going to solve many of the problems facing us in the Web2 era. And also, frankly speaking, we have seen some scams and bad players in this field. Here comes a very important question. What do you think will make an ideal Web3 economy? So Tamara, what's your view on this?
So one of the most powerful narratives surrounding Web3 is that it is a movement toward a better and fairer internet. However, it's good to have in mind that Web 2 started with a similar promise of empowering individuals, creators, and removing intermediaries. So Web 3 presents an opportunity to build an entirely new internet and indeed entire new economies from scratch. And the question then becomes, what kind of internet should we be creating, right? And some indicators show that early design choices in Web3 are replicating or compounding the inequalities of Web2 and the real world, like the gender inequality in crypto investments, for example. If you want Web3 to make good on the promise that it can materially improve the situation of everyone within the ecosystem and not just a handful of people at the top, we need to design it according to principles that will make that happen, right? And it leads us to find a balance between freedom and equality, which are opposing values. A society in which all actors are completely free is likely to result in a significant amount of inequality. And conversely, a society that is completely equal in its freedom. And this is a philosophical framework for the internet. And that's why we need to discuss the design choices now at the beginning of this transition.
Thank you, Tamara. So, Sean, what's your view on this question? And I would like to hear your insights.
It seems Tamara's got a very good handle of this. I think one thing that I find really interesting about the blockchain is that you don't just see the immediate counterparty in a transaction, but you see the whole ecosystem of all the related transactions or flows of information, and with whom the other wallets or individuals or counterparties are engaging in a specific blockchain. And I think to your question around bad apples, if you will, how do we deal with the scams and the issues that have emerged? I think it's one really powerful tool.
Ideal Web3 economy, perhaps to preventing the scam as part of the way we prevent that problem. Maybe how can we make an ideal Web3 economy? Yeah,
I think that technology, provided that, say, the likes of blockchain power Web3 is built on, and we can use those techniques of looking at the ecosystem of with whom we deal, with whom they deal in turn. And it's something we're already doing. We've counterparties. You can check if they've engaged with, say, business. It flags on top of the traditional KYC and AML checks. And I don't think it's the necessarily silver bullet to know if you're dealing with somebody reputable, but it's something that we haven't had in the traditional way that at least financial services has operated. I think there'll always be bad actors. The challenge is if we can use the technologies to add perhaps that idea of a time series where you see behaviors, repeat behaviors, and you get a better feel for how that counterparty or someone that you might be engaging with is really looking, if they're looking to make a quick buck, or if they're looking to build a long-term relationship. I think that long-term relationship view normally helps sort the wheat from the chaff.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Okay, so David, can you share your idea on this question? I think previously we have discussed a lot about such similar topics, and you must feel very deeply about this question.
Yes, I think what is the ideal Web3, as I mentioned earlier on, at the end of the day, Web3 has to be a privacy protection and to ensure that individual property rights are protected at the disposal of the individual so that they can have a certain sense of independence. But we are very far from Web3 at this moment. And a lot of cases that we see of irresponsible innovation comes from Web 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, but they are never Web 3 because there is some centralized element somewhere, and that centralized element that need to be regulated are not regulated, that ended up with some of the misbehavior. And some of this misbehavior is partly because of awareness. A lot of them may not know exactly what they are doing, because we are into an innovation, into a very new area, that the impact cannot be measured sometimes after the effect. And while we are doing our innovation, where there's mass adoption, we have to constantly review the impact on the society and to ensure that the harm is a lot less than the good that we are doing. And that constant review from 2.1, 2.2, all the way to 3 is a journey that I think the industry have to go through. And I agree with Jane that it doesn't matter whether it's called 2.3, 2.4, or 3. It has to be the case of whether it's medical record, whether it's manufacturing, whether it is supply chain or whatever. It has to create jobs and it has to contribute to the society. And from my 35 years in financial market, it's always the case that where things are too good and when you're very confident, that's the danger, because where you're serving a few people, a few stakeholders, and you are winning the whole market, you have to be very careful, because that is not considered, as far as I'm concerned, that there's distribution of wealth is not there, and there is a social responsibility. So to answer your question, how do we have a ideal Web3? It is a journey that, as a whole industry, we have to bring awareness to everybody, especially those who have not seen the crashes that I have seen from 1987, 1993, and they all have the same human behavior, which is that when you're overconfident, when you are driven by peer pressure, that you don't even know that you're becoming very greedy and you're serving a few people. I'm not saying that we are all immune to that. We are all having the same problem as a human, and therefore we have to constantly speak out. We have to constantly bring awareness so that we have discussion like this for us to understand that it is a journey for everybody, and we have to work together to make it work.
Thank you, David. Jen, do you have some comments with the ideas, insights of Tamara, Sean, or David? And what's your view on this question?
I do. I've got a couple of thoughts to add, and one is, again, coming out of blockchain, and a lot of the pieces of Web3 are coming out of blockchain. One of the challenges I think we have is that blockchain was born out of libertarians and anarchists, and they're still amongst us. And there's a certain degree of tolerance within the community for that particular set of attitudes. And even with things like all of the scams and the money that's been ripped out of DeFi and Chef Nomi running off with $14 million, and we all giggled at that. It's actually not funny because this is people's money. So I think within the industry, we need to take a more responsible stand, and some people are. So I think, there needs to be less tolerance of bad behaviour within the industry. I think that's important. I think, secondly, the industry itself can help figure out ways to adopt and enhance standards, because even things like, don't invest if you haven't done your due diligence. I can't do due diligence on DeFi code or something. I mean, we need to be able to create structures so that we can have a look at what's happening and make sure that it is sensible. But the other thing, and Professor Lee, I think this is really important, is we need to have much more discussion more broadly as a society and within Web3 as a community about ethics, about doing no harm with what we're doing, and thinking about, because when I started looking at this, there's no kind of professional standards body for ethics in code. Coders aren't trained in ethics. They're not trained to think about the consequences of their action. They're building a really cool piece of tech. So I think we need to have that broader discussion about what you're building and what are the unintended consequences going to be, but also on the broader issue around equity and social justice and those sorts of things. Well, a Web3 that's going to be accessible to all has to be on a mobile phone. You're not going to have everyone wandering around the deserts in Mali with Oculus goggles on, of course not. So we have to think about the kind of infrastructure that you can build Web3 on that's going to make it much more accessible to more people and not further exclude people by making it infrastructure heavy and expensive.
Yeah. May I have a rejoin there? Because I think I totally agree with Jane on this, and that's the reason why I co-founded the Global FinTech Institute. And we have a set of ethics for the chartered FinTech professional to abide by, because I look at a lot of financial activities that we have. There's nothing specifically to FinTech. And a lot of time we only focus on finance, but tech is totally different. And when it comes to Web3, when we design something and it becomes autonomous, the design thinking has to abide by a certain ethical standard. And you can't just design anything and hoping that it will work. And sometimes you have not done enough due diligence or enough thoughts into your design thinking, and all the collapse that we've seen in a lot of scams, they really think that it will work. But unfortunately, there weren't enough discussion, and it was driven more like, how can I get my network out with the mass adoption, with the prices going up the fastest possible, rather than having a positive impact on the society. And Jane, you correctly pointed out that regulators and government only will be tolerant if you are contributing to society and you have responsible innovation. The minute majority of the industry are not responsible and there's no ethical behavior, then it's about time, even for all of us who are involved in industry, to call for very stringent action against those that misbehave. So Jane, I'm 100% agreeable with what you just said.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's come to the last question. Also a very a question many people are concerned with: how to ensure equity in the Web3 era, and how to ensure that people from around the world enjoy equal access to resources. So, shall we start with Tamara, please?
Sure. So I think we can start with some principles. First, promote self-determination, right? We know that early governance structures have largely instituted token-weighted voting, which the result being plutocracies. And I think participants and builders of the Web3 ecosystem need to push for a democratic system of governance that give a voice to all its members, not just a select few. So tokens could be distributed according to an algorithm designed to maximize diverse social clusters, for example. And the second principle, I think it's reward participation and not just capital. So Web3 must have more ways to provide value to an ecosystem than through capital. And furthermore, that value should be able to be earned and not just purchased. And this is a radical departure from the existing structure. But it's important steps to ensure that everyone is on an equal footing and can attain positions of power or compensation through their own merit and contributions. And one way, for example, is by making it possible to earn ownership through ongoing participation in networks and not just capital investment.
Okay, thank you, Tamara. Sean, what's your view on this question?
I completely agree. I think ethics is a big deal. The question is how do we actually live those ethics as an industry and as an ecosystem? I think it's really tricky to say an individual company can define the ethics, because in game theory, for example, you often have the challenge if you are behaving correctly or to an ethical standard, you don't necessarily make the most profit. And ultimately, I think corporates will be involved in the evolution also of Web3. And I think, again, the view of a time series, the blockchain affording that helps, but it's not the be all and end all. So I think there are a lot of very important initiatives. I think is a total step in the right direction as well. The Future Technologies Association, I think, sort of groups can help that discussion progress ultimately towards either the self-regulating bodies or industry bodies being adopted into law. I do think education is a very big deal to open up access. And I think one thing I've learned is I'm a very traditional reader of things. I like white papers, I like written formats, but I think gamification is going to be a really important tool to open up access. I think injecting a bit of fun and different formats for people to engage with material is a very novel use of the new technologies that we've learned now on the internet with 2.0. And I think there's a challenge for entrepreneurs to take one of the things, kind of the Napster phase, make it more of a Spotify phase when you do have proper user interfaces and a sense of not just an intuitive experience and a good consumer income, but also a bit of fun. I think that aspect of fun will make things a bit more intelligible to a broader base. But I do think education and ethics are the two big things that we need to work on. And also policymakers need to help listen and engage.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Professor David, do you have something to add?
Yes. I have a few points to add. I think Sean and Tamara covered quite a fair bit. I think the most important thing is that whatever goods and services that will be produced, the destination has to be universal. I think it's important that whatever we do, and we are talking about Web3, the first thing we need to think about is energy. So it all has to do with sustainability. So everybody must have access to cheap energy, renewable energy, solar panel, and so on. Second thing is that everybody must have access to communication. And a lot of countries, 80% of them still have no access to broadband communication. So we can't talk about Web3 unless these two enablers are there. Besides that, and all the education, digital literacy, and secure network, and so on, has to all to be there. But to me, the most important thing now is that they must have sustainability, where individuals have access to cheap energy, cheap renewable energy, and cheap communication.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Since David, you're an education expert, how do you think that will people on the educational front, how can we help more younger generation to get more access to Web3 opportunities? Okay, let's Jen. Can you share some of your thoughts on this question?
So I just want to make a couple of remarks. To repeat what I said before, is that the majority of the world's population anytime soon will only have access to mobile technology, and mostly they access whatever form of internet they've got through mobile. And I just heard a term that some of you may or may not have heard, because I hadn't heard of it before a couple of weeks ago in Portugal at a big conference. And someone was talking about Gen Alpha, which is the next generation after Gen Z. And based on the research they've done, Gen Alphas want to access things on their mobile phone. So I think that's one issue. But I agree with all the points that have been made. We need to be building Web3 for the whole population of the world, and that means really thinking about issues of bandwidth and infrastructure. And people are working now. There's a group called World Mobile Network that are trying to, connect outlying villages with mesh networks and so forth. We need to think about how we bring the majority of the world's population into any access with the internet, and then don't make Web3 inaccessible. I think that's tremendously important.
Okay. Thank you, Jane. I think because we're running out of time and we have to wrap up our discussion this time. I really appreciate your insights and your precious time. Tamara, Sean, David, and Jane. You joined us from Germany, London, Singapore, and Dubai. Let's have more discussions in future days, because you are truly pioneer in Web3 field, and you will have many new experience to share with us. I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you very much for your time today, and have a good day, have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks to the other panel members. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Am I in the right room?
Yes, you're in the right room. Don't our moderator for this panel. Great to see you, everyone. Right now, lots of audience on YouTube and Vays, which is a Chinese live streaming platform. And also in the Meta Bloom, which is a metaverse live streaming platform, many people are watching our live stream at this moment. So, Professor Golston, I will give I'll give the floor to you, so you can begin the discussion with our speakers. I think all of our speakers are here. Great to have you all. Enjoy the conversation.
All right, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, pretty clear.
All right, perfect. Thank you everyone for joining this discussion. I am Justin Golston. Just very quickly, in the Web 2 world, I'm a professor at Penn State University, as well as an advisory board member at Georgetown University. In the Web 3 world, we are democratizing education by building a university in the metaverse with SidTech DAO. It's going to be a university for the people, by the people. So this discussion is going to cover, the transition from Web 2 to Web 3 and change the mindset for individuals and organizations. So we have a very esteemed panel, and I look forward to this discussion. So very quickly, could you all introduce yourselves, talk about your organizations, talk about your projects? I just want to start with Zach.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. My name is Zach Burks. I'm the founder of Mintable. Mintable is a NFT platform. Allows for anyone to create NFTs, also trade, buy, sell NFTs. We're known for quite a few things, and we're quite large. We have over 1 million users. We've done millions in volume. About a month ago, we checked. We had about 2.6 million NFTs created on the platform. And we support Ethereum, IMX, and soon XRP. So just a little bit about us.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Brian?
Oh, hi. Yeah, glad to be here. I'm Brian. I call myself an internet veteran in past 20 years. I have experienced the internet quite a lot, from Silicon Valley to other part of the world. So I entered the blockchain NFT world since 2018, because that's the time, not too early, but not too late. So that's the time I found that's the pretty good solution for us to enable the business for the next generation of the internet. Currently, I'm running on my startup called Optic Network. It is, we try to build a business-grade NFT infrastructure to enable the NFT business for the next. So which include the infrastructure part and then marketplace part, and also an open platform to support any type of NFT applications to run on top of that. Yeah, I'd love to share more today.
Thank you for that. Cedric, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm Cedric. I'm head of business development of a KuCoin community chain in the North and South America region. And I came from a background of public policy and international relations. And for us, KuCoin Community Chain, we are a chain built by fans of KuCoin and KCS, which is our governance token. We are a decentralized public chain and EVM compatible. And right now, we have already onboarded, even though we are quite young, but we have already onboarded 70 plus projects deployed on us. And also we have more than 470 wallet addresses on our chain.
Yeah, thank you for that. Finally, Anderson.
Thank you for having me. I'm the CEO of Chains.com. That is focused on providing a different experience from C5 different users, the product, the chain, like any account. We have just over half of users. We currently deploy first months. So myself, I've been in the space since Best word yet. Israel.
Excellent. Anderson, can you turn your sound up a little bit? It's a little difficult. If it's not, yeah, if it's just me, just let me know.
Sure. Can you hear me any better now?
Yeah, that's better now. I like that. All right, so yeah, Anderson, we're going to stay with you on this discussion, in that, you know, we're still, even with the current market conditions, we're still hearing a lot of discussion in the topic of Web3. So devs are still doing something. So Anderson, you know, what's your view on you know, Web3 in the current state, and where do you think it's going to go in the future?
First of all, I think the conditions are actually amazing. This winter is definitely the best winter yet, especially for someone who's seen the crashes of 2015-14, which was a winter that had no particular end and little promise for the industry. Obviously, the hangover that came after the ICOs of 2017, that basically had no fundamentals, and we saw literally projects collapse within 18 months, which triggered another huge winter, which saw very little capital deployment and very few kind of successes. But the successes that were born during the winter of 2019 and 20, they were basically the best companies of the recent bull run. I think that right now we will see a lot of companies with great fundamentals that have risk capital from their companies and that are entirely focused on building. I think we're going to see a lot of amazing products, specifically in Web3 space. Web3 space right now consists of DeFi, the gaming industry, which obviously is play to earn, anything that is NFT and metaverse integrated, DAOs, which is a huge and untapped potential, and basically services that enable direct connection to the user's wallet, which is both cryptocurrencies and NFTs. And I think we'll see further democratization of both kind of access to financial tools and even business activity. And I think right now we're also seeing more certainty in regulations. If 2017, 2018 were chaos and huge uncertainty for anyone participating in the market, there are now more and more jurisdictions that provide certainty of what it means to build a company in that particular jurisdiction and what it means for the users. So I think that there's a huge promise in terms of what Web3 can do for both businesses and users. And I think the biggest potential still lies in DeFi, which is about making sophisticated financial products available to retail users. That's one thing. Another huge aspect is anything that has to do with NFTs, and most importantly, intellectual rights tied to NFTs. I think the music industry and basically any monetizable intellectual property is going to really explode. I really like the conversations with sophisticated markets for music, for videos, where people can trade ownership of monetizable intellectual property. And I think this is going to be playing a big part in the metaverse, because the metaverse is essentially an environment that provides enforceability into intellectual rights. So if in the past, let's say you own rights to a song, you relied on entities like RIAA and MPAA for enforcement of your intellectual property. On the other hand, if you have NFTs that are tied to either movie or music rights, and you are utilizing those NFTs in a metaverse environment, the metaverse ensures the enforceability of that intellectual property. And I think that's going to make a significantly more sophisticated and more fluid market.
So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the release, and I think that the next forum is going to be far more fundamental based than the previous
one. Excellent. Thank you for that. And you brought up a good point in terms of regulation. I want to get to that before we run out of time. So Brian, what's your thoughts on the current state and future state of Web3?
Yeah, so well, I think it's definitely we're still in the very early stage of Web 3.0 because people are still debating what's the clear definition for that. But in my view, we are in kind of like a river of no return. So that's the trend we're working towards that. So this actually bring me back to my old days, right? So in 98, 99. So that was the first bubble period of internet in Silicon Valley. So we experienced a similar period, right? Bubbles and a lot of crazy stuff, and not really useful cases. But that's all belong to the early stage of something, right? So that's why I'm pretty optimistic to that. But then dive into the details, then we can see it really means something real to us because in Web 3.0, this direction, it means a better framework that we can protect our property, privacy, right? And also bring with a very strong and trustless technology infrastructure to hold it. So at the same time, especially with the blockchain and then NFT as a foundation blocks, be part of that. It means the future of commerce, social, and maybe economy models are building into this the brand new system, which is a natural evolution of a human society and also technology world. So that's why I'm pretty optimistic to that. But on the other side, I also want to say don't have too high expectation at this stage that people want to see very sexy use cases. It might not happen because in this stage, the infrastructure are still being built, right? So there's a lot of components are moving forward in parallel. So that's why we need to have patience to waiting for that. Maybe at this stage, I will see more simple and practical use cases will happen. But more complicated cases will happen maybe a little bit later when the infrastructure become a little bit mature. Yeah, but so in general, I'm pretty optimistic to that. That means great opportunity for the industry.
Yeah. Yep. And I love your project because the infrastructure is one of the big things that are currently needed in the current state. And you're providing the tooling, you're bringing the tools to the gold rush. So I'm very excited on what your project is going to build out. Cedric, what's your thoughts on where we are in terms of Web3 and where we're going?
Yeah, I think echoing what Brian was saying, like we're at the very early stage on the road to Web3. So I think to us right now, maybe we want to look at a lot of things like Web 2.5, meaning a lot of integrations in terms of consumer apps or video games that really can onboard a lot of Web 2 users to Web3, and that create meaningful use cases for them. And I think potentially maybe in future, like the majority of the world's crypto transactions, they won't happen on crypto exchanges, but in actual embedded apps like consumer apps, things like things that we use to shop or things we use to do gaming. So yeah, that's what I think the future of crypto would be like in the near future. And also fundamentally, I think for Web3, I believe in Web3 because Web2 only brings us the ease of exchanging data, but I think Web3 actually brings us true ownership of the data, and we can actually trade out data. So I have a very firm belief in the future of Web3, and I think right now at this stage, I really want to look at a lot of projects that like consumer apps and video games that can onboard the next big influx of users. And of course, infrastructure is important because that supports these the possibility of these applications.
Excellent. And I like how you pointed out the whole concept of Web 2.5. That's one thing I've always been, thinking about and talking about. And people argue in that, Meta could be considered Web 2.5, because I can say that that's a progressive decentralization model. They're never going to be decentralized, in my opinion. Those are my thoughts. But yeah, I think that, you hit the nail on the head in that there needs to be an on-ramp to the masses, and I think that, this phase of Web 2.5 is going to be that. So Zach, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think what Cedric was talking about is kind of point on and talking the next wave of where we're going. I mean, if we go back where we've, kind of come from over the last few years, it's been pretty crazy to think of. Let's go with NFTs because I know NFTs best. CryptoKitties starting out as essentially the intro for almost everyone into what NFTs are, and to where we're at now. The amount of money that is in the space, the amount of activity that we've seen in the space. But yeah, Brian and Cedric both talked about we're early, and we are early. There's about 4 to 5 million NFT users on Ethereum right now. That's about it. But when you look at the actual chart, the graph mimics the same slope and growth rate of the internet and the adoption of the internet over the last 30 years. And we're still very early on. So, that's really promising. And so, yeah, Web 2.5, you're talking about Meta. That's really interesting. I didn't think about that, but you're right. Meta is almost acting as this gateway for the masses in an environment where it's not very easy for new people to come on board. And that's kind of like what we're trying to do is focus on these, not the 5 million people that we already have, but the, potentially 7 billion people that we can still reach. Now, how we do that is going to be different than how other companies do that. And only in time will tell over the next, I would say next few years, we're going to really find out. But I think NFTs will play a very important role. And I think NFTs are, I always like to bring this back to my mom. If you try to stop and talk to my mom about Bitcoin or DeFi or anything like that, it's going to go right over her head. She's not going to listen to you. She's going to say, what are you talking about? But if you talk to her about something like trading baseball cards or artwork or music, she can relate and understand that. And I think that this is where NFTs are really powerful. And I think this is where you get, there's always going to be options, derivatives, and all these complicated financial instruments that a very small subset of people can utilize on like Wall Street and advanced traders. But the average everyday person doesn't deal with it. And I think NFTs is the crypto equivalent to the everyday introduction. So super, super excited for the next few years for NFTs.
Yeah, thank you for that. So whenever we're talking about, the metaverse and we're talking about Meta, so whenever Zuckerberg made the announcement, I was actually in my office doing my office hours, and they made the announcement, and then I went into the classroom to my students, undergraduate students. I had 2 classes that day. I went to my undergraduate students. I said, did y'all hear about the Meta announcement? And the college kid said, Facebook's for old people. We're not going to use that. So to that point, the students, this younger generation, they're interested in Web3. And they're digging into Web3, and because they're familiar with Minecraft and Roblox, right? They're going to be the main builders of the metaverse, right? So I'm just, framing it from a metaverse perspective right now. So they're actually providing the tools, they're providing the knowledge to our generation, right? So given that, they may be the builders, they may be paving the path for Web3, what's your thoughts on that in terms of entrepreneurs, in terms of CEOs, in terms of founders, where, we have this younger generation that will have different perspectives, and they may be thinking about things that we're not thinking about, so Brian, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think, well, no matter what age we are, but we need to live in the current market and the trend, right? So that's the way to stay young forever. It doesn't matter with the age. So at this moment, I think it's very important to learn what is decentralization about. So that may bring a lot of common topics and the common grounds with a younger generation or even some open-minded older generation. In my view, metaverse, Web3. So because I'm more focused on the blockchain and the NFT, I think that's the fundamental blocks to enable that. And also talk about decentralization. It's not just about the technology itself. So we are talking about mindset. It also involves with the operation model, which also should consider the decentralization, which is a community-based model, right? Then we need to talk about how to make money. So because of the nature of a blockchain and NFT, we can build into economy model into that. That's also different from our traditional model, where we can also call it a decentralized business model. So with 3 layers, technology, operation, and the business model, that's the full mindset we need to have in order to communicate with the current generation, because they will grow up in such environment, so they don't have such boundary that we had before. So in basic, so we need to recognize, right, this is the age that you own your data and you own your asset. And also, of course, you own your business. So that's the framework we need to talk about and to live with any type of generation together. Yeah, that's what I think.
I like that. Instead of a tech stack, we have a Web3 implementation stack.
Yeah,
I'm gonna use that. You didn't try that one yet. I like that. Cedric, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think because I haven't been into crypto for too long yet. So I think first of all, for me, I felt like it's really important for us to be willing to take risks and also make mistakes. And because there are not many set rules in the industry that we can follow, so we have to innovate. And on the other hand, I do feel that we need to always keep a learner's mindset. And because the industry is so fast growing and there are so many new talents joining, so I felt like we not only need to have to learn from those who built Web3 before us, but also we have to learn from new talents and new innovations.
Thanks for that. And I think that, always learning is one thing that has led to the demise for a number of organizations. When I said in a talk, years ago, if you don't adjust, if your external environment is changing quicker than your internal environment, your company is doomed. It's a quote. So that's the quote of the late great Jack Welch. You don't want to get blockbustered. You don't want to get clubhoused. If you're familiar with Clubhouse. So that's going to be one thing that's going to be very interesting as we evolve into this Web3 space. So Anderson, what's your thoughts on this younger generation disrupting, the current business landscape?
Yeah, I just must say absolutely. There is no playback to this. To follow a lot of projects may want to present a 3 or 4 year roadmap. At the end of the day, it's the projects that are capable of continuously adapting to the market. They are the ones that are going to win. And if up until now we got to a place where we have 120 million active users in this industry, people who are transacting cryptocurrencies or NFTs, the assessment is around 120 million users. I could say that most of those users are technologists, at least to an extent. They appreciate the technology that is behind the blockchain, and they took some time to kind of learn it. We cannot expect the next 900 million users that we want to onboard into this ecosystem, which would take us to get to 1 billion users. We cannot expect the next 900 million users to be technologists. It's just that simple. The people that we've onboarded so far are going to be drastically different from the people that we're going to onboard in the next 3, 4, 5 years. And that means that we need to build products that behave differently, and we need to learn how to communicate about those products in an entirely different way. Just like people do not think of Facebook as a PHP company just because it is built on a lab stack, we must not talk about NFTs and cryptocurrencies as first and foremost blockchain products, and then kind of assume that people are going to care about learning what the blockchain is. We need to learn to build products and communicate those products in non-technological, in non-tech ways, and learn how to onboard users who do not care about the underlying technology. And I think this is going to be kind of the key for success in the next cohort of winners, the next cohort of great companies that are capable of really onboarding those non-technological users.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. And that goes back to, the infrastructure and the tooling, similar to what Brian's building out, and that, the onboarding is going to be very, very important. And I think that, those front ends, we still have, although, like you said, we're technologists, so we can get it. But the front ends, I think that, we still have a ways to go to kind of get the masses into it. And you have an excellent point in that, the ultimate goal is to create these websites, create these tools where you don't even know you're on a blockchain, right? So, or you're interacting with the blockchain, I should say. So that's an excellent point. And so finally, Zach, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's each one of you guys are going through different points that I have as well. So we're all quite aligned here. But to talk on some of these things, you're talking about the front end. And Anderson, you brought up the next 900 million people are going to be different. You're absolutely right. They're going to be different, and it's all based off of that front end interaction. The problem is we're limited because of either regulation or lack of regulation in some instances, where we want to do something or make something easier, but we can't. And this is unfortunate. So to answer the question more directly, you talk about the next generation is kind of paving the business landscape. I think one of the ways that we deal with this, one, being a pretty young guy myself, I don't feel too disconnected, but we do try to build for the current landscape, but in a vague manner. So launching new features is one thing, but launching new features that could potentially be used in multiple different ways, more than what you just imagined, I think is really important. There's been a lot of things that we've shipped over the years that we thought were not going to be important, or were going to be very minute, but ultimately ended up being used a lot and were very important. And this just goes to show that you don't necessarily know what's going to be received or get product market fit. So because of that, you got to be agile, but you also need to be able to build something with a vision that can be vague enough that it can be used in alternative ways or easily pivoted to an alternative system in some capacity. And that allows to remove kind of that pain or friction of switching over, but also allows you to take advantage of a trend that you may not have anticipated. And so as you go about, like, we have this technology called Mentology. And Mentology is kind of its own company within Mintable. It's its own brand, and it builds for enterprise clients, very large Fortune 500 and multi-billion-dollar multinationals for NFTs. And the way that started was a solution that we built for our consumers on the marketplace. And ultimately, because it was a vague solution, it was very easily pivoted to something very valuable. And this is, I think, kind of, we have young people shaping the landscape. But one of the ways that you can respond to not just young people, but also just unforeseen trends is by doing something with a certain nature of that vagueness. So.
Excellent. I like that. Nice shirt, by the way. 8 game. So we talked about, what what we see from an external environment, but based on what you're seeing at this given point in time, yes, we said that, yes, there's a consensus that we're still early, but given what you've seen so far, we'll start with Cedric. has your mindset changed with the Web3 movement? And I want to kind of, because whenever I think of Web3, I think that that's a convergence of just not blockchain, but multiple technologies. I think of it's the integration of the Internet of Things. It's also artificial intelligence. You can also say edge computing. I'm not even going to talk about quantum computing. I still think we're years away from that. But if we look at Web3 from a integration of these tools, Cedric, what's your thoughts on how your approaches, how your mindset has evolved with that?
Yeah, I think personally, on a more personal level, I think I felt like I became a lot more altruistic after joining Web3, because I think this is an industry that's full of startups and new ideas. So in order to grow those with a team, you have to be altruistic. And you have to change your mindset to be like that in order to succeed. So, for example, for KuCoin community chain, KCC like us, we support projects on our ecosystem, incubate them without, you cannot consider how much you are getting back before doing that, because you want those ideas to happen. And also it's how we work with our team members as well. Be altruistic is something that I felt like, being in the Web3 industry, that you have to have that personality. And the other thing is, I think maybe be truthful and critical. I felt like because we want to, because this industry, we want to solve a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of things that was not working. So you cannot always follow the establishment. So you have to think fundamentally, and also rather than following what's already worked or what's already there. So that's two things that I think my mindset, personally, my mindset really changed after joining the Web3.
Thanks for that. Brian, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I really agree. So I think in order to work in Web3 and be even a driving force to push the Web3 forward, we do need to have a right mindset with that. Especially the open mindset, right? So currently, I think there's two directions people are working on that. So one is from the crypto native, or I would say Web3 native part. We try to do something new, to do something very creative. So that's one thing we're experiencing. So right now, this requires a true believer and entrepreneurship to do that. Otherwise, you cannot break the border. But on the other side, we cannot just play in our own circle. We need to break it and penetrate into general public. So that's why we also need to, even myself, talking to myself, I need to step one step back to think about how to help the current industry to go through such transformation, maybe from 2.5 to 3. So in our practice, so we're talking about NFT. So I always say, there's NFT represents all type of unique digital assets. It's not just artworks, collectibles. So that's why we define the collectible NFTs and also functional or utility NFTs. So that's will cover a lot. But they probably in the collectible NFTs, it will be more Web3 native. We can play a lot based on that. But on the functional utility NFTs, actually we can help the traditional business to build a bridge from their current business model into the new one. So that's something we're practicing. Especially I see a huge potential on the, I would say, utility or functional NFT, like a ticket, right? A membership card, loyalty, a lot of things. So that's the whole new world that we need to explore and we need to make it happen. So that's why I think in our mindset, no matter we are doing the Web3 native or we are building bridge for Web 2.5. So the same mindset is we need to be pretty open, and we need to be entrepreneurship, and we need to be creative, right? And also we need to be the risk taker. So that's the spirit we need to have, and probably create some great opportunities for the future.
Thanks for that. Yeah, you make a point in terms of the utility for NFTs, because I think we only scratched the surface of that. In that I think that the NFTs, I think Anderson, mentioned, within the music industry and things like that. And I see a bigger opportunity in, the finance industry, insurance industry, supply chain, for NFTs and having true utility. So I'm super excited about NFTs in the Web 2 world, if you will, and having those organizations transition over. So Zach, what's your thoughts?
So the question was, how has my mindset changed? That's kind of a hard question for me to answer. I've been in crypto since 2012. So it's been a long time for me, and seeing my mindset change is hard to quantify. I'll tell you that there is something that I believe strongly in, which is actually, Brian, you put these into two categories. You said crypto native in one. And as you were describing, you were kind of describing me and how I'm going to reply on this response, which is you actually need to uphold Satoshi's vision as a founder in some capacity to be able to understand that you're building and you're laying bricks on a road and a path that is literally the history in the making, and you're making it. And if you choose to build a bridge, or if you go left or you go right, you're literally the reason that the road is bending. So you have to have some sort of morals and guidance at a fundamental level. And I think those can be summed up into a few things. And that's why I brought up Satoshi, because their core beliefs behind Bitcoin and really Satoshi's grand, ideas when he created it, which is essentially 1, decentralization, 2, being your own bank, 3, the right to a freedom around your currency, not to be limited by unjust regulations, at least in my American mind, and then some general privacy around the user and anonymity, and these things are really important for the idea behind cryptocurrency to succeed as it was laid out. Now, in reality, there's some things that we're not going to get by, which is fully anonymous wallets, most likely. It's just too easy for us not to have that. And therefore, in the coming years, we probably won't have fully anonymous wallets in some capacity. Or if you do, it's illegal in some way. And that's unfortunate, but you've got to try as a founder to do your best. And so I think my personal mindset is obviously to have those as a moral foundation, and then to be guided by those morals. And there's a few other personal morals I have, but I think being guided by your morals is something that's really important.
Thank you for that. And I think that's the big thing. And I think that, I think we're going to see, so yeah, guided by the morals is a big thing, especially in this space. I think that transparency is one thing that's much needed, not just in the Web3 world we're in now, but like I said, in other industries, such as like the supply chain industry, where blockchain could provide that transparency. But, you brought up an interesting topic of being your own bank. And I think that that's one thing that we could lead to onboarding people, because if you explain to someone DeFi, you explain to someone that you can borrow against an ape, borrow against a JPEG, they're like, wait, what? Right. But I think that once people understand it, it's all about the education, in my opinion. I think once people understand it, I think that we'll get more adoption. I think that, once we explain it to the regulators, then the institutional investors and then the organizations will come in. I think that's going to be huge. So a lot of people are against regulation. I think we need it so that we can get those masses in here and those large organizations in. Anderson, what's your thought?
Yeah. So, I mean, it has to be kind of a philosophical question and answer as to how kind of the industry changed me and how I perceive things. And I was extremely fortunate to kind of be involved in this industry since 2011. And I was part of a group of academics that were mining Bitcoin in these wooden rigs with NVIDIA cards. But also at some point, we saw projects like Color Coins and Mastercoin appear. And then eventually I ran into Vitalik in some basement here in Tel Aviv in 2015, and he was showing us Solidity before the Ethereum ICO. This is kind of part of the roadshow. And to me, one of the things that I kind of saw specifically in this industry after being a decade in it, I saw that amazing projects fail, but at the end of the day, amazing people persist. Basically, a person who is great will persist over a long period of time, over multiple projects, over an entire decade, and they can carry huge systems such as Ethereum basically on their backs to a degree. And projects that have had better fundamentals on paper, better teams, better overall, end of the day, they fail because they lack this one amazing, there's a gaming term called carry. Basically, the person who carries the team on the back and end of the day persists for many, many years. And I think like this is the case definitely in this industry. Like we've seen time and time again, people just carry the project on the back and make it a success, even when they're competing with an entire free market with possibly stronger fundamentals. And that kind of really taught me to look for these people that are capable of carrying amazing projects. The other thing that really kind of the industry taught me is that, it's a very young industry. It doesn't have a legacy. It doesn't have these monolithic kind of systems that people tend to adhere to, that they tend to follow. You get into virtually any other industry, and there's a huge body of work. There's like specialist people who define what the right way of doing things is. And it doesn't really exist in the blockchain space, because the best business practices 4 years ago, the best code practices 4 years ago, they are no longer relevant today. So kind of the pragmatic way of operating in this industry is always looking at where the ball is today in terms of best practices and where the ball is going to be a year from now, and based on that. So in this particular industry, there's less weight to legacy. There's less weight to that one guy that spent 7 or 8 years building this one, because you're saying, okay, the guy that actually been working for the past 3 months building things is very likely to be more valuable than the guy that was working for 8 years, because his knowledge is more on point, is more relevant, and we should act on that. And I absolutely love it. It leaves less space for biases. It basically leaves only space for autocracy.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So we're running out of time. In this discussion. So just very quickly, in about 30 seconds, please give your takeaways or your calls to action into how users can begin to transition from Web 2 to Web 3 or Web 2.5, however you want to put it. Start with Cedric.
Yeah, I think if you have new ideas, it's really a good time to join this revolution to getting into Web3. So contact any ventures or mainnets like us, KCC KuCoin Community Chain. We can help you your ideas to grow and succeed. Anything else? I think be innovative, and yeah, there are a lot of resources that you can use. This industry, I think, is super supportive about new ideas. So just go ahead and make it happen.
Yeah, and then also everyone, just let the audience know where they can find you and your projects.
Yeah. Should I mention my website?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, just go to kcc.io or send an email to cedric.shan at flsdex.com. Yeah, and give us an email or showcase what your project is working on. We would like to support.
Thanks for that. Brian?
Oh yeah, so yeah, actually, today's talk make me remember an old phrase we had in old days in Microsoft. We call it practical magic, right? So that's something I really want to say. So for most people, see we are building something magic, Web3. They don't really understand, but at the same time, I believe this group of people, we belongs to the pioneer group of this Web3. So we need to be more practical to build a bridge, build the infrastructure. And also NFT is part of the asset layer in the infrastructure. So in my view, those are very important. So for those people who wants to build their new business or transform their current business into Web3, they also need to be very careful choosing the right platform, right infrastructure. So that's the only way can make a success case and also make it sustainable, right? In my view, so this is really important at this stage. Don't rush to something you don't understand and then you're not sure, but just step by step, you will see the lights. So in my project, we call it Optic Network, so optic.network. So you can also contact me at Brian Shing, XIN. Brian Shing is my Twitter handle. So yeah, just reach me. I'm pretty open to talk to anybody who wants to do the NFT-based ecosystem applications. Because I think marketplace is only the place to trade, but a lot of value stored in the ecosystem application, right? Like music, video, a ticket. So that's the huge area we need to focus on. When we have more ecosystem NFT application, we can see more blooming marketplace happening. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Zach?
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. You can follow us on Twitter, Mintable_app. You can find us at mintable.com. If you're trying to create an NFT and you're just an artist, you go to Mintable. If you're trying to sell your NFTs, you go on Mintable. If you're a business or you're starting something around NFTs and you need to do a lot of NFTs and you want to stay on Ethereum, then we have a solution for you through Mintology, where we work with a lot of publicly listed companies and things like that. That you can find at mintology.app. So yeah, reach out to us and contact us if you guys have any questions.
Excellent, excellent. Finally, Anderson.
So first, it's kind of the question: what does anyone that wants to interest in Web3? What should they start? What should they explore? I still think that the best way of starting with Web3 is kind of this book that's showing more. And basically, if you learn about Bitcoin first, and if you invest in Bitcoin first, I can show the book properly. But if you learn about Bitcoin specifically first, and getting your first piece of Bitcoin and understanding how you got it, and how you can store it, and how you can send it, that's going to change your life forever. Because this is the first time you've actually owned money. This is the first time that nobody can take that. And I think only after you've, at least to a degree, mastered how to use Bitcoin, then you can start learning about other projects. And then you understand how they are different from Bitcoin. But I think getting your first piece of the Bitcoin and understanding how it works is going to change your life forever. And from that point, you'll be curious about everything else. And you'll have mental tools that you haven't had before. So that's basically going out to anyone who was interested in Web3. I think that will be the way to start. And you can find more about us on chains.com. Welcome to visit us. We'll see our social channels there. Join our community. If you feel like contacting me directly, I am Anderson at chains.com.
Excellent. Thank you for that. That concludes this discussion. Thank you everyone that participated in this panel. And I'll hand it back over to Jenny. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Thank you, Zach, Cedric, Anderson, and Brian. Really enjoyed this panel. Thank you for your time. Let's keep in touch. Look forward to more achievements from each of you. Thank you. Have a good day. Have a good afternoon. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, good to see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I think I have three questions for you. I think we need to be really quick. But don't be too quick because you can just go into depth about your explanation about the answers. 20 minutes in total.
Okay, that's fine.
Nice. Okay. I think
I'm just putting out the live stream link, so hopefully people will be watching.
nice. So live stream is on now. Thank you. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our audience, no matter where you are in the world. Warm welcome to our Web3 Disruptors Week. Right now, let's come to our third session of today. That is our fireside chat with Thu Vays. Thu Vays is a very renowned crypto analyst, Bitcoin analyst to be more particular. Today, our topic is the currency in Web3. Before we start to go to the Q&A session, I would like to take some minutes to introduce Thu. Thu has worked on Wall Street for 10 years prior to discovering Bitcoin. Since then, he has been educating people on his YouTube channel about the importance of this unique financial technology. Thu has been featured in several documentaries like Magic Money, Bitcoin Beyond the Bubble, and several media appearances, media like CNBC, RT, and more. So, warm welcome, Thu. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you, Jenny.
Great to have you, Thu. I have long been expecting to talk with you, and thank you for making my dream come true today. Okay. Before my first question is, can you briefly introduce about your history with Bitcoin crypto to our audience?
Sure. I first heard about Bitcoin in very early 2011 when WikiLeaks was shut down from being able to accept donations by Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal. And it did show me that, well, Bitcoin has a real use case in being censorship-resistant value transfer. That remains one of its biggest use cases today. We've seen this use case pop up time and time again. It happened a little bit later with Silk Road when people were buying whatever they wanted from Silk Road. We saw the Greek banking shut down. People couldn't access their money. We're witnessing it more recently with Canadian truckers being denied banking because of their views on politics. We saw it with Russia when Russia got kicked off from the SWIFT system due to sanctions. But that property, when I first heard about it, was interesting, but it wasn't interesting enough to really scare me
out of the current financial system and into Bitcoin. That happened in 2013. There was a whole other property of Bitcoin that people very underestimate. And that is the fact that Bitcoin is the first unconfiscatable asset in human history. It is very different than transferring it without a middleman. It is the fact that if you acquire Bitcoin and you acquire it in a certain way, and you protect it in a certain way, then that Bitcoin becomes completely unconfiscatable. I watched in 2013 the Cyprus banking confiscation, where the government just took 50% of people's money. And that actually got me scared. Wait a minute. How does a developed country in the European Union just take away people's money out of their bank account? And that's when I started seriously investigating Bitcoin. And it's true. Bitcoin is the first unconfiscatable asset in human history. We witnessed it again more recently with the sanctions on Russia. Governments in the West just decided to confiscate the wealth of Russian businessmen. They call them oligarchs. They took away their yachts. They took away their apartments. But the one thing they can never take away is your Bitcoin. Whether that's good or bad is certainly debatable, but the technology is now there that you can hold something of value that no one can just take away because they disagree with your views and opinions.
Thank you, Tom. Well, definitely you have been participating since very early in Bitcoin. Right now, there are lots of discussions since Web3. Many people say that it is likely to be the unstoppable future. Currency is play a central part in any society, in any countries. May I ask what kind of currencies would people use in the Web3 era? We know that right now we have lots of we'll have lots of money in the market. We have several fiat money, and we have lots of crypto, and also we have some CBDC. So do you think that in Web3 era, what kind of currency would we use? Would it be Bitcoin or a certain type of crypto, or would it be a mixture of others? What's your idea on this?
That's a really good question. And right now, we are all living in a world with many fiat currencies. There's probably about 180 countries in the world, and I think there's probably about 120 currencies. Many of the countries that don't use their own currency use either the euro or the US dollar. Those are generally the two global currencies that people use. Even in Hong Kong, for example, they don't use the Chinese currency, they use the dollar. They have a currency pegged to the dollar in Hong Kong. So what happens in Web3? Well, at the moment, most Web3 projects are being built as blockchains. And one of the easiest way to make a blockchain is to have a blockchain with its own token. It provides a way to finance your project by basically creating your own money. I am not a big fan of this practice. I believe that in the future, in the free market, without force, without regulation, I believe that in a free market, we will all gravitate to the single blockchain that is the most immutable and the most secure. Today, that blockchain is clearly Bitcoin, and I believe it will remain to be Bitcoin. So while there are many Web3 platforms that are being built out, and they have a token, and that token would rise in value as that Web3 project starts to get popular. But there is almost nothing a Web3 project can build that can't be copied over to another Web3 project. And because of that, it is very difficult for Web3 projects to actually innovate. Because if they are following this, non-regulatory path where there is no enforcement, there's also no enforcement of your patents. it is very difficult to enforce a patent in this crypto world. A couple of people have tried, but have not seen anybody succeed. So because of that, there is nothing that a Web3 project can create that would be able to force people to use it. And that means we're either going to have so many Web3 projects, or everyone is going to culminate onto one. And when there is that one, what is the currency inside that project? At the end of the day, I think people want simplicity and people want stability and reliability. So I envision a world where something like the movie Ready Player One, where there really is this one virtual reality world. And to me, Web3 eventually boils down to a virtual reality world. There's either a few of them with one layer that they can all interact with, but probably there's going to be one virtual reality world that we all participate in, just like we have one internet that we all do this on. Yes, there is Zoom and there are other video streaming platforms, and we can choose which video streaming platform we use, but we're still on the same internet, because otherwise it will be impossible for us to communicate across different video messengers. So I do think that at the end, there will be only one currency in Web3, and that currency is going to be Bitcoin. There might be other in-game currencies, but there will always be an option to exchange your in-game currency for Bitcoin. And the first Web3 project to properly give their users the ability to utilize Bitcoin, that project will probably be the winner. But it's very, very challenging to build this project, because where is the money going to come from to build it? You can't create Bitcoin out of thin air, but you can create other tokens out of thin air. That's how Ethereum started. That's how Cardano started. That's how all of these other crypto, Solana, they all create the token first, get a bunch of money, and then start building something. Now, 99% of the time, it never gets built, and it turns out to be an outright scam. And 1 or 3% of the time, something gets built. But just because something got built doesn't mean it's going to be successful long term. And as we saw with Celsius, for example, they were promoting how they're the most capitalized company in the space because they have $2 billion in reserves. But those $2 billion were in their own token. And if there is a panic on your token and the price of token trends towards zero, you have no more money and your company collapses. So I think that Bitcoin is going to be the one currency that every Web3 project will eventually have to integrate. And then we will see who the winner is. But I fully expect Bitcoin to be the currency of not only Web3, but our current live in-person interaction world.
Thank you, Tom. If you think that Bitcoin is the only currency in Web3, perhaps we need to discuss how are the fiats? Would you think that Bitcoin will replace the fiats?
Yes, I do think eventually Bitcoin will be the world currency that everybody uses. It'll still take a while. It'll still take another decade. And Web3 is still a long time away. These virtual reality interactions, we're still a long time away from that, but that is where technology is going to go. And Bitcoin makes a very easy transition into Web3. So I would advise a lot of these Web3 companies not to even try to integrate their own currency into it. You're better off creating an equity. You're better off creating a security of the company, where as your Web3 project succeeds, you have an equity token where people get to participate financially the way that securities go today, like Facebook and Twitter, they have stock. And as the company does well, the company stock rises. So that's what I advise Web3 companies to do, and just integrate Bitcoin as the currency there. But a lot of companies just want to integrate their own currency because they have more control. Just like governments don't want to move to Bitcoin, they want to continue using their own currencies because they can control money creation and they can control how people spend the money. There's no different than in Web3. The only reason a Web3 company would integrate their own currency is because they actually want control of the people inside Web3. They want control of that currency creation and they want control of how people spend that money. It is no different than our traditional world, but people want freedom. People want to spend their money in any way they like. And this is why eventually freedom wins. Freedom always wins. This is why we don't have a one world government. This is why capitalism tends to win. This is why, Russia collapsed after 70 years. China couldn't maintain the communist way of life. It is very difficult to maintain full control of people. And I'm hoping that trend continues and people want to be free. And there is no greater freedom than the ability to spend your wealth and store your wealth in any way you choose. And Bitcoin is the only asset to grant people that freedom because nobody controls it.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. My next question is, just earlier this month, you were warning another Bitcoin collapse. So do you still think the same? What's your prediction on where the Bitcoin price will likely to go next?
Wow. So I did my own video right before I got on this Fireside chat. And I think the next 24 to 36 hours are very critical for Bitcoin. I really liked how Bitcoin broke out above 22,000 and made it to 24,000. But now Bitcoin needs to stay above 22,000. We have pulled back to 22,000. This is basically as low as I'm willing to see Bitcoin before assuming significantly lower prices are likely to happen again. So if in the next 36 hours, we are able to stay above 22,000 and push back up towards 23, 24, I would have a lot of confidence that last month's low price of 17,500 will never be seen again. But if Bitcoin starts to fall back down towards 20,000 in the next few days, I would then anticipate a move lower than that $17,500. So Bitcoin is in a very, very critical position right now. I've been saying for months that I expected Bitcoin price to bottom this summer, and we still have a month and a half to go of summer. And it's very hard to say whether that low is in or not. I say 60% chance the low at 17.5 is there. But if we start falling back to 20,000, then I'm going to go back to 50-50 or even a greater than 50% chance we're going to go lower. But sometime this summer, we will finally get that bottom if it hasn't happened yet.
Thank you, Tom, for your prediction. I have one more question before we go. After when I read your bio, I feel very impressed by this. You have been explaining to the world about the importance of Bitcoin, this financial technology, this unique financial technology. You have huge background. You have lots of Wall Street financial background. So can you explain to us more to why you think that Bitcoin is a very unique financial technology? I think for people who have been in this field for several years, we have some thoughts about this too. Maybe as right now, Web3 is a huge topic, and many people from other industries looking at what is happening in blockchain. What is Bitcoin? So can you share your idea? Explain more about this.
Sure. So look, I'll be the first to admit, Bitcoin isn't the fastest means of transferring data. There are things that are faster. It's not the cheapest. Transactions still cost a little bit, and at certain times they cost a lot more. It's not the most private. Bitcoin transactions are very publicly visible on the Bitcoin blockchain. But what makes Bitcoin unique is that it is decentralized. It is the most decentralized thing in the world. It is the most decentralized system in the world. This was achieved in several parts. One of them is when Satoshi released Bitcoin, neither he nor anyone else expected it to succeed. He also left the project very early to allow it to develop in this leaderless environment. The way Bitcoin grew up, Bitcoin's first 2 years, you cannot replicate Bitcoin's first 2 years. It is actually impossible. So many people think that they can create a better decentralized project. You can't. The whole concept of you creating a decentralized project automatically removes it from having the possibility of being created. Bitcoin is the first token where people have thrown away thousands of these tokens. People could have tens of millions of dollars right now if they understood how valuable those tokens were in the beginning. That doesn't happen with any other project. Any other project, everyone thinks that it can be the next Bitcoin, and they immediately start investing in that token in order to make money. The way Bitcoin grew up is you can't replicate that. And that's what makes Bitcoin decentralized. And even today, it is very difficult to make a change to the Bitcoin code. There are true believers in Bitcoin that will not let any kind of code get in. If we disagree with the code, we will run our nodes in order to prevent code changes. The mining network uses up a lot of energy that makes it very difficult to corrupt Bitcoin by spending more money. Proof of work is the innovation. The way Bitcoin evolved, you just can't replicate that. Again, this is why a capitalist system will always be better than a communist system, because in a communist system, someone in charge has to oversee each stage of production and supply chain. But in a capitalist system, it creates incentives where a single person doesn't have to oversee everything. So this is why capitalist systems eventually win. And this is why proof of work is the best form of blockchain over proof of stake. So it's just the decentralized nature of Bitcoin gives these checks and balances between miners, node operators, and coders. And if you are unable to run a node in your blockchain, if you cannot validate the transactions, if you do not have a say in what code changes take place on your blockchain by running your own node, which should be free to do and or very, very cheap to do, your blockchain is just not decentralized. And 99% of these other blockchains, you can't run a node. It is very hard to run a node in Ethereum, which is why I believe it's not a decentralized system.
Thank you. Thank you. So do you mean that 99% of other blockchains are not decentralized, not
Correct.
truly decentralized, right? Thank you. So if you do you have more thoughts to add before we go about what's your suggestion to the people who want to get into the Web3 field? What is your suggestion to them?
Sure. Look, I don't want to sound too hypocritical, but you have to understand the technology and you have to be in it for the technology. Those that get involved in any of these crypto projects, whether it's Web3, whether it's blockchains, whether it's NFTs, if your main motivation is getting rich and making money, you might get rich and make money, but most people don't. Most people end up losing more money because luck eventually runs out. You really do have to be in it for the technology, and you have to understand the technology, and you have to help build the technology. And if you are building the right technology, then having that value, having that token can help. But everyone that got into this because they thought that the token would just go up in value and then they would be rich, have not had the best experience. And the same thing applies to Bitcoin. Those that understood Bitcoin and got into it at a bad price, at a high price, they were okay because they understood why they got into Bitcoin, and they were able to hold that Bitcoin token through its downswings because it just got a little too expensive. But many other projects, once the token starts going down, it kills the project. Bitcoin, that won't happen. The value of the token will not kill Bitcoin because there are these people, like myself included, that need Bitcoin, the network, to survive because it's the only way to give people freedom in how they spend their money. So just be very, very careful and be very cautious on everything that someone will tell you because there is this space is full of so many promises and most of them fall short.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tom. Really appreciate your sharing. And let's keep in touch. Look forward to more of your insights in future. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.